Appears to be none. I move to question number 12 in the name of the Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, my question's to the Minister of Defence. Does he take responsibility for the Defence Force morale reaching the lowest levels since surveys began, attrition rates soaring to over 21% and reduced Defence Force capability? If not, why not? Oh,
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
On behalf of the Minister of Defence, I reply no. The member is using historical data. Morale is going up, attrition is going down, and both measures are forecast to continue improving. To deal with the three issues raised by the member, I note that attrition for the New Zealand Defence Force regular force today is less than 17%. Well below the 19% high reached in 2001. Army attrition is less than the level in 2005, and Air Force attrition is less than half of the 24% reached in February 2002. On capability, to quote the Chief of Defence Force's last report to the Select Committee on recent events, quote, "There has been no effect on our ability to generate immediate capability, no reduction in our ability to respond to any contingencies or our ability to sustain operations." And finally, morale has been on the rise for the last 3 quarters, and 4 out of 5 people don't have issue with their morale.
Mr Speaker, Mr. Speaker, since the Minister's answer was no, I seek the leave of the House to table documents authenticating each of the statements in the question as factual and accepted as such by the Clerk's office.
And the source of those documents?
There are 3 documents, Mr Speaker. One is the Office of the Auditor-General Financial Review. Another is a document that... let me just find it for you, Mr Speaker, is the Vote Defence Force estimates for vote defence.
At this stage, all of these are readily available to members.
Well, I'm making the point, Mr Speaker, that the Minister denied these reports were factual.
Not the purpose of tabling of documents.
Well, actually, not all of the
member has further supplementaries. I haven't heard
point of order, Mr Speaker. Just answering your question, I don't believe that the document from the Officer of the Auditor-General, the Financial Review, is a public document. It sets out clearly that the attrition rate...
That's a fair call. And
okay,
what's the third document?
The third document, Mr Speaker, was the... Let me find it once again. It's a document, actually, that was given to the Select Committee this morning, showing that satisfaction rates had declined from 65% in the Defence Force in 2010 to last year to 38%.
Is to put the leave that those 2 documents be tabled. Is there any objection to that? Further
supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Is the Chief of Defence Force right in saying that the government required the Defence Force to implement the civilianisation project which caused such low morale and soaring attrition rates, and that he, as CDF, couldn't avoid it? And doesn't that replace the responsibility for the failure of that project squarely on the Minister's shoulders and that of her government?
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Defence, I refute the assertion in that question that the civilianisation has failed. In fact, it has been extremely successful. The point that I made to the member on his original question is that the data that he is using is out of date.
Point of order.
Mr Speaker, I seek the leave of the House to table a memo from the Chief of Defence Force, and I can assure the House this is not in the public arena, where the Chief of Defence Force makes it absolutely clear that civilianisation was the responsibility of the government.
A member is asking for clarification on the date of that memo.
30th of January 2013.
Leave is sought to table the memo. Is there any objection? There's none.
Supplementary question,
Supplementary question, Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, was it a deliberate policy by the National Government last year to slash Defence Force numbers by over 1,000 to the lowest level in at least 11 years and probably longer, or was it the inadvertent response to the failed and disastrous policies of the government that led to a quarter of the Defence Force leaving and another 40% in the Defence Force survey saying they intended to leave.
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Defence, I say again to that member, there has been high attrition in the past. However, the figures today is less than 17%, well below the 19% reached in 2001. If we want to talk about cuts, then the biggest cut to the Defence Force was the cut of the air combat part by that former Labour government.
Question,
Supplementary
Mr. Speaker.
question, Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr. Speaker, why did the Minister ignore clear warnings from the Army in 2011 that the policy of cutting numbers, as I have pointed out, would, quote, significantly impact on their ability to sustain operations, end quote, and warnings from the Navy that the cuts would mean they couldn't put their ships to sea, something that's been borne out this year in practice?
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, again, on behalf of the Minister of Defence, I refute the assertions made in that question. The Chief of Defence...
Point of order, Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr. Speaker, is it in order for the Minister to challenge assertions that I have quoted from the Auditor-General's report?
Yes, it is certainly in order for the member to do that, for the Minister to do that. That's for the House. That's for the House to determine.
Yes, Mr Speaker, I hadn't even said which assertions I was challenging.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, continuing from the comments that you and my colleague Phil Goff have made, my understanding is certainly the conventions of the House is that you don't bring the word of the Auditor-General, who is an officer of Parliament, into doubt either in debate or in question, and the Minister did.
No, I don't. Speaking to the point of order, Honourable Gerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, if that were the case, then the member should never have used those comments in questions without making it very clear where they came from, which he didn't.
I think it would be an odd situation where every comment ever written by the Auditor-General was accepted as gospel by every member of the House. Would the member like to ask further supplementary
question?
Phil Goff.
Mr Speaker, how does the Minister justify over 300 staff who were made redundant solely because the government needed to cut numbers, being told that they were being made redundant because they weren't up to their job, something refuted by the New Zealand Defence Force staff itself and by the Auditor-General, who said that that was effectively telling good people they were bad? How does she justify that slur on the character of people that she dismissed?
Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Defence, I think that it's fair to say that the New Zealand Defence Force has acknowledged over a year ago that the civilianisation project could have been handled better. They have acknowledged that publicly. However, the important thing is that attrition is falling, morale is improving, and we have an outstanding Defence Force for New Zealand.
That concludes questions for oral answer. Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I understand from my colleague, the Honourable Damien O'Connor, that you have declined an urgent question on the Auditor-General's report on biosecurity. So I'd like to refer you to three things. One, Speaker's Ruling 1823, which makes it clear that an answer, a member would normally get an answer in 48 hours, but where an adjournment is due, then special consideration should be given, and we are going into a period of adjournment. I'd like to refer you to McGee Parliamentary Practice, the third edition, page 553, where he says in relation to urgent questions, where an urgent question has been submitted to the clerk, it is for the Speaker to consider whether it should be allowed to be asked on the grounds that it is one which, in the public interest, should be answered immediately. For a member to be able to bypass a normal practice for questions, there has to be a need inherent in the question for it to be answered on that day or before a member could normally get an answer through submitting it through the normal channels, which of course would be Tuesday of next week. And Sir, I refer you to the summary, the overview statement from the Auditor-General, where she says plans for responding to potential incursions from some high-risk organisms are not yet complete. For example, the plan for dealing with a foot and mouth disease outbreak is inadequate. Mr. Speaker, it seems to us that we have a very real situation now where we have a gap in our system. That gap, the Minister might have an explanation as to how that gap, which appears to have been there for a little bit of time, could be closed in the next 14 or 12 days. And so because of the very serious nature of, for example, foot and mouth disease to our agricultural system, it is a question on which really the whole country and our economic future hangs on the answer. And therefore, sir, I submit that it does in fact meet the test. Now, of course, we can't guarantee that there will be an incursion in the next 12 days. But, sir, I would invite you not to rule that there can't be.
Speaking to the point of order, the Honourable Gerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, in no circumstances would you be in a position having to make such a ruling as the final comment from that member. But what I would say is, I think the whole question, or the whole issue around urgent questions and in particularly in this case, falls to one side and in favour of your decision, because the member has himself said that these conditions have existed for quite some time. And he quotes page 1823, the fact is that 1826, 1825 and 1824 lend a huge amount of weight to the decision that you've made. We're going into what effectively is a 1-week recess, not a 2-week recess, and the circumstances that the member is trying to suggest are hypothetical, and no doubt, Mr. Speaker, during the time that we have in recess, officials will look at the hypothetical position being put before the House today and be able to give a better explanation of why for some time this gap has existed and how they expect to fill it.
I thank both members for their contribution. An urgent question has been lodged, and urgent questions are allowed to deal with matters that require the absolute immediate attention of the House. They may be asked whether the Speaker considers that it's in the public interest that they be answered immediately. The classic circumstance is an irrevocable course of events, something that is about to happen before the House sits next. I fully accept that the question lodged by the Honourable Damien O'Connor raises a serious matter. Biosecurity protection does not relate to any identified specific immediate risk. I have taken guidance from the clerk. I have had a look at standing orders. I refer the Honourable Trevor Mallard to Speaker's ruling 1826, which reads, the guidance used in deciding whether a question is urgent is to ask whether it needs to be answered today, tomorrow or next week, or the week after. And in my opinion, the member's question does not raise an irrevocable turn of events, and that is the test. There is no greater risk now than there was earlier today as a result of that report, and I therefore rule that I am not allowing an urgent question. I call on Government Order of the Day number